This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, January 13th, 2022, and my guest is the awesome Avram Piltch of Tom's Hardware. Hi, Avram. How are you?
Great. How are you? It's so wonderful to be on with you again.
Yes, I'm really happy to have you on because we haven't talked PCs in a while on the show. I mean, at least not in detail. And PCs are mobile, and a bunch of stuff happened at CES, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even though this was the lamest CES of all time, there were still some things that happened at it that were very interesting.
Exactly. So I want to talk about some of the things we didn't cover last week. I had Michael Fisher on last week, and we obviously covered CES mostly on the mobile side with a few things that stood out on the kind of PC side. We talked about ASUS's cool 17-inch folding screen tablet laptop thingy. We talked about the crazy Lenovo laptop with a built-in tablet on the right-hand side. So we've covered those. But, there's a bunch of stuff we haven't covered, and I kind of want to get your finger on the pulse there because you're kind of an expert at this stuff. But also, the one thing that intrigued me was that new Dell XPS 13 Plus. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it seems like a delayed reaction to Apple's Touch Bar, but, Touch Bar is no more. So what is Dell trying to do here? What's your take on this weird laptop?
They're trying to get yet another more premium segment of buyers that's like a slight step above the regular Dell XPS 13. So they have to find some way of saying, hey, this is a little bit more premium. We can charge a little bit more money for it.
Right. And do you think they're going to succeed with this? Because there's a bunch of compromises here, right? Let's walk through this. This is a very thin and light, super sexy laptop, right? There's no doubt. Yep. But to me, what stands out and could be good and bad, depending on how you look at it, is it's got no headphone jack. Well, that was bound to happen, but really, even Apple hasn't done that, which is interesting. Even on the MacBook Air, which is not their Pro version, they still have a headphone jack. So the other thing is it has the function row replaced with capacitive, basically buttons. It's weird because they're not reconfigurable. So it's not like a touch bar, but it's capacitive nonetheless. So I don't understand it. And then there's the trackpad, which is, maybe you can clarify how this trackpad works. It's like not, it's in the middle, right? But it doesn't have an edge. So how do you know where you put your fingers?
I think that will be a point of some confusion, right? I guess you'll have to figure it out. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's form at the expense of function, which we see a lot. I mean, we saw this with Apple. We're seeing it now with Dell. I mean, would I get this laptop? I guess we'd have to check it out, but probably not. The headphone jack is not really that, for me, not that big a deal. It seems to be going away from a lot of things, and I personally prefer USB, using a USB headphone anyway. But, for the size and weight, you could get a laptop which has USB Type-A ports, and that would allow you to plug in a USB microphone or USB headset, which is what you really want that audio jack for. Whereas otherwise, you're going to be living the dongle life and having to plug in everything into a USB hub, which, is becoming very common these days, but I'd rather live without it. I mean, for the same less weight, I can get a Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon that's 2.49 pounds. This is 2.72 pounds. So we're talking about actually lower weight, and I can get 2 USB Type-A ports on it. Sure, it'll be a little bit thicker, but I mean, to what end? What am I going to do with it being this? Like, what good does it do me? Is a thicker one not going to fit in my laptop bag? No way. I mean, even you're talking about.
So what's your take on this touch bar thing? It's not a touch bar because it's not a display that is touch sensitive like the touch bar used to be, but it's basically replacing the function row with some capacitive preset buttons. Why? Why bother with that? Like, it's going to be a worse experience no matter how you cut it.
There's no functional reason to do it. It's just to, like, I'm eliminating the borders around the touchpad or trackpad, whatever you want to call it, it's form over function. Oh, look, it's different. And we're talking about it, so they succeeded in that regard.
Yeah, but why is Dell doing this? Like, it seems misplaced after Apple got called about a more sophisticated system, mind you, but that was pretty much, vilified by most of the community. And they dropped it even. For Apple, that's kind of rare. And then Dell comes out with this thing, which is technically worse, but it's kind of the worth of both worlds, right? I guess, like, it's not a display and it's capacitive, so you lose real buttons. It's just weird.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I mean, it looks like a terrible usability experience. At the same time, they probably are thinking, hey, there's a whole bunch of users out there who don't use function keys in 2022. They never hit their function keys. They just use them as media keys. Because look, the way that they've labeled it, they don't even have F1, F2, F3 on there.
Right.
So you would have to know, oh man, even the escape key is not a real key. I'm looking at the picture now.
See, this is why I put this in the notes, because I kind of wanted, from a diehard computer guy, I wanted to know what your gut says. Like, is this where we're going with laptops for consumer use on the PC world? Or is this just Dell having a moment of brain lapse and they're going to come back to their reason sometime soon?
It's an experiment. We've seen experiments like this before. I think Lenovo did something weird with their functioner on a ThinkPad a couple of years ago too. Everyone's experimenting with these things. I bet that the next year they will come out. If there's a generation 2 of this, that it probably will go back to having regular keys, but it really depends. I mean, as a usability experience, I wouldn't recommend this. Like, right. I mean, I'd have to try it to see how much it matters, but it would matter a lot to me because I'm constantly hitting my function keys. Now, for someone who's not using their function keys a lot, I don't know, maybe they just never rename anything or have to hit F2. Maybe they never think about hitting F11 to make something full screen in Windows. Maybe they don't think about those types of keyboard shortcuts. Right. They just click things or whatever. Then if you think of these purely as media keys, like volume up and down and play and pause, well, you don't have to be able to, you don't need those for touch typing, right? It's only if you're a person who's hitting function keys a lot to use them as function keys. Now, I don't know. I feel like I hit escape quite a bit. But
me too.
But maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I don't hit escape as much as I think I do. There may be a world in which there are a lot of people who don't have to hit those keys a lot and won't really notice.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I never owned a Mac with a touch bar, but I used the initial MacBook Pro that had the touch bar without the escape key. And I immediately noticed how much I use the escape key. In fact, I immediately noticed how much I use the function keys as well, even on a Mac. So it's not a good thing. I don't think so. And clearly Apple's gone back. First, they put the escape key back, kept the touch bar, and now they don't even have the touch bar. And I'm not against like innovation and trying new things and experimentation. I don't want Dell to think that. But there's some things you just don't mess with. And I think keyboards and function keys and all that stuff is stuff that's just, it's part of the fabric of the user experience. Unless the OS radically changes, like an iPad versus, a PC, you don't really need to reinvent that stuff. Like reinvent thickness, thinness, power consumption, like do all the things Apple's done with the M1 chips. That is actually meaningful stuff that people benefit from, right?
Now, on the flip side of this, of course, I doubt it's the same user or the same consumer, but there are keyboard aficionados who are buying 65% mechanical keyboards that don't have a function row. So they would be fine with it. They would be fine with this setup, but I doubt that they are the same person who would want to be typing on something this thin because the key travel and the experience on those key switches is probably not fantastic. Maybe it's okay. No. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it doesn't actually have bezels around the keys. The keys are all touch each other, basically. Like it's like, I don't know if you noticed that on this
Yeah.
XPS.
It's like a netbook.
Yeah, that honestly doesn't bother me, but I'm just like, what bothers me is a lack of function row, and the headphone jack I can live without. The other thing that bothers me, only because I haven't used it and I don't know what it feels like, is this trackpad. Like, I kind of thought originally when I saw it that the entire wrist area, the place where you put your wrists when you're typing, was an entire touchpad. I was like, that's really cool. And maybe they have palm rejections. And maybe when you reach for the trackpad or touchpad, when you touch, where you touch it becomes the center. So you can touch it anywhere.
That would be an interesting concept.
And then you kind of get a 16:9 area defined by where you touched initially that becomes your area of work, until you move away for a while, and then it resets to the middle by default. And then if you touch again, it kind of picks that as your center point again. I don't know, like something clever like that with palm rejection would be really cool. But that's not what they're doing. It seems like they're arbitrarily picking a third of the middle to be the touchpad, but you don't really know where it is, and there's no way for you to know where it is, which is really strange.
Yeah, that's just weird. This is going to go down in history with the nose cam as something that, that was a unique experiment, but I don't think it's going to stand the test of time. However, your idea sounds pretty cool. What I would want to see from that idea, though, is not to have it be completely invisible like this, but have lights or something under it. So when you touch it, it draws a box around where you touched or something.
Or if you do what Apple does, where they have, the clicking is not a real click.
Right.
It's haptic. Have some sort of haptic feedback where if you drag your finger, you can feel the edge. Like it goes, it goes like zzz, in that one spot, where your edge is. And that would be cool too. But anyway, I want to move on and talk about other things. Does this laptop have the new Alder Lake 12th gen? No, this is much more, the Alder Lake is a much more powerful chip, correct?
No, it's going to be Alder Lake.
Okay.
It's going to be Alder Lake. I mean, Alder Lake comes, and actually it's going to be Alder Lake P. So that's going to be pretty good because Alder Lake P can operate it up to 28 watts, although they probably won't run it at the full 28 watts.
So walk us through the different Alder Lake chips, what they bring to the table for what kind of laptop, and more importantly, how do they compare to Apple's new chips?
So, well, this is interesting. Alder Lake is really the first x86 that has kind of the feel of an ARM chip, in the sense that it has the big little concept where you have some performance cores and some eco cores, which are low energy, efficiency cores, which are low energy. And so what you're seeing now when you talk about core counts is you'll have a laptop that has like 14 cores. But what does that really mean? It has 6 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores. Or they have ones that have 12, which are like 4 and 8. So what does that do for you? It means that more of the TDP, more of the power and heat envelope can be given to the task that you need done. So let's say you're playing a game, although on this type of laptop, I don't know if you're playing a game, but I don't know. Let's say you're compressing a video, you're doing something that is fairly processor intensive. But at the same time, you also have other things running in the background that are not. Maybe it's, your email, your Dropbox, your notifications, whatever, don't require a lot of power. So that type of load will be put onto the efficiency core, which uses less of those, 20 or 28 watts.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense.
And so you can actually get better performance on the things that matter to you because of this division of labor. So that is what Alder Lake is all about. Now, previously, all of these thin and light laptops, whether it was the Dell XPS 13 or the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon or the HP Spectre X360, all of them used Intel U series processors, which only went up to 15 watts. They are still, I believe, going to offer those. But what we are seeing is more and more of the companies saying we are going to offer the P series, which go up to 28 watts. Now, they probably will configure them to only go to less. It might be 20 watts or something, but they will give it more wattage. more wattage means higher clock speeds, means more performance.
Yeah.
So by doing this, because they're able to get it to run cooler, I think because of the division of labor, but also maybe better cooling solutions, they are now able to really get to higher clock speeds and really concentrate the workload on what matters. I think with Apple's chips, you're also seeing that there's division of labor. Apple is obviously in great shape because they make the operating system. So
Right.
Apple is going to make sure that the scheduler is going to work absolutely perfectly, meaning that Mac OS is going to know exactly what core to assign to what task. What the schedulers appear in our testing on at least desktop Alder Lake to work pretty well, but still, I think it remains to be seen with the mobile version of Alder Lake. Are the lesser tasks being assigned to the lesser cores so that we can free up that performance for the things that matter. And that's something that once we get in our first Alder Lake powered laptop, we will absolutely look at. So, but it's definitely it's cool because you're getting more performance in the same type of system.
100%. So this is good news. Hopefully that we can start seeing some battery gains and some performance gains. That's, both directions, right? Like if you want to be super efficient, you can be. If you need some heavy lifting, you can get it. So this is good news. I really hope they can deliver. I hope Windows, scheduler handles this properly. I mean, basically, I'm really hoping we can see, Windows PCs catch up with what Apple's been doing in terms of performance and battery life, because it's the future. I mean, I'm on an M1 MacBook Air, and as my travel machine, and I'm dying to get myself on some sort of ARM-based iMac. I'm on an Intel Core i5 iMac right now, because my little MacBook Air entry level model runs circles around my 2-year-old iMac, like literally obliterates it. And this iMac is AC powered. It doesn't have any thermals or batteries to worry about. So it's crazy to me that, I have a laptop that sips power that runs better than a 2-year-old desktop. Now, it's not a custom built, gaming PC desktop. I'm sure that would do pretty well, but it's interesting. And so I want to see Intel compete, and I'm happy to see that they're heading in that direction. Do you want to talk about the this crazy Samsung Odyssey Arc display?
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I'm, again, you cover more desktop things than I do. This is not mobile, but hey, sometimes we're at home and we want to use our our mobile devices, maybe like a laptop on a nice display. So this is kind of crazy because it's the first curved display that has a optional landscape orientation, correct?
Yes, I mean obviously they all do, because if you detach it and use a Visa mount, you could do this, but you don't normally see it touted as a feature. And one thing to note about it is really, really curved. So
yeah,
it's not like most gaming monitors you see have a curve of 1800R. The lower the R number, the more curved it is. But this has 1000R. So it is really curved. So what I think, and I personally can't wait to try this one out. What I think it's doing is you've got something that is 55 inches, right? So if it were flat, you would have to do look up really high to the ceiling to see the top of it. But if it's curved, that means you don't have to move your neck as much. So you can see more because of the curvature. So
yeah.
I think this is kind of cool. However, it's only 4K resolution. So now maybe that's okay, because I say this and I'm talking to you, I'm looking at a 4K monitor that's 28 inches, and no way can I view it at 100% scaling. I have to put it up to 150 or 175, or
Right.
I get a headache. So, maybe 4K is okay, but what they were demonstrating was having 3 windows stacked vertically. So, what would I do? I would get 2 of them and put them next to each other and see if that is adequate to an adequate substitute for the 4 monitor setup I have right now. But it's I mean, I'm always in favor of multi-monitor, multitasking, lots of things for lots of windows. So I think it's a cool idea. This is more of a concept product, though. I mean, I'm sure it'll come out, but it'll be so expensive that I doubt many people will get it. And it will, I mean, it's really neat that they're showing it like this. I don't know how many people are going to use it in that portrait mode and how useful it is, but if they sent me one, I would definitely try working on it for a while and see how it felt in terms of, like how much am I looking up versus how much do I have to crane my neck for this thing. But it's a cool idea. I mean, I like this idea. I like this kind of innovation. I'm always in favor of give me more screen real estate, give me more ways to multitask.
Yeah, I feel like personally that I want to buy 3 of them or 4 of them and put them in portrait next to each other and have this crazy, that's curved screen, but curved the other way. I don't think that would be very effective for gaming or video watching, since it's obviously 4 lines or 3 lines to look at. But for like setting up windows, for writing stories, like for vertical scrolling type stuff, like Twitter and stuff, that would be really dope.
Yeah, you could probably view a whole lot of web pages and actually see content below the ads.
Yeah, so that's the first thing that crossed my mind when they showed that you could use this thing, but beyond the Visa mount as a portrait thing, and they were making a fuss about it. I was like, I need 4 of those. Give me 4 of those.
Yeah. I think 1 would be inadequate. It would have to be at least 2 or 3. I mean, I'm a big multi-monitor user. I'm talking to you right now, and I have my setup here. I've got 2 monitors on the bottom and 2 on the top. So I like the idea of having multiple spaces for different windows and things. So the fact 100%. that they're encouraging you to kind of stack 3 windows like that, and then you put 3 of them next to each other. Could you have like 12 active windows open and not get them on top of each other? I would try it.
So in case people don't know this, there's a video version of this podcast available through Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. That's patreon.com/tankgirl, like my handle on Twitter. So if you want to see Avram, well, you can't see his screens because the camera is looking in the other direction. But my point is that if you want to watch us on videos, you should join the Patreon and check it out, because you get it in advance of the audio version and you get it mostly unedited. There's it's a little more raw, basically, more real. But I just want to point that out to people who are like wondering if they can get a video version. Yes, you can. The audio version is still free, will always be free, and will come out on Saturday, so you'll get the video version a little ahead of time. But the next thing I want to kind of poll you on, should we talk about TCL's next Wear Air wearable display, or should we jump into, since we're talking monitors and displays, should we jump into that crazy Air Cleanse? Germ filter monitor? I don't know which one. Let's pick one.
Okay, let's go with the Air Cleanse because I know it a little bit better. So, had you heard of this before, by the way?
Well, I saw it as part of the CES feed of stuff, right? Because I wasn't there. So I just saw it and I was just like, this is weird. So tell us, what's the deal here?
Yeah, so as a journalist, I always tell my people that I work with, we're in the business of interesting, not the business of good. So so just because something is is interesting to read about does not mean that we endorse its use or it sounds like it's necessarily a good idea. Right. So I actually spent some time and I interviewed the people who run Air Cleanse, which is the company that showed up at CES. Actually, they were at Showstoppers, one of the nighttime shows, and they showed off a prototype monitor with a built-in HEPA filter. And the idea is that they will put HEPA filters and fans into the bezel of a monitor, and then it will catch the germs that are coming out of your mouth and filter the air and spit them back out again. However, there's inherently problems with this. First of all, the first ones are the obvious ones that you don't need to be a scientist to figure out, which is that you don't spend your entire day at the office staring straight forward. You might look to the side, you might look up, you might get up. So this is definitely not going to obviate the need for people to wear masks if they're worried about contagion. So the other thing about this is they don't really, I mean, they had somebody do a computer simulation of whether or not it might work, and the simulation they said worked out okay, but that kind of remains to be seen. Now, they are not a monitor vendor. They are not making a monitor. What they would like is they would like to find a monitor vendor to license the idea of putting HEPA filters into a monitor.
Interesting.
And then they will, work with them to put them in. They do not manufacture anything. So, it's an idea. They also want to come out with a laptop, want to work with someone to come out with a laptop dock that will have a HEPA filter built into it. Basically, they just want to push the idea of building HEPA filters into the stuff on your desk.
I think that's not a bad idea per se, COVID or not, because, it's nice to clean our offices and air, and we all have air purifiers in our offices, most of us, and it's just a nice thing to have. But I think they targeted the wrong device. This is ideal for all-in-ones because all-in-ones have fans already for cooling the CPU. So what you do is you put the HEPA filter in there, and it's, you run the fan kind of constantly. It cools the CPU, it cleans the air at the same time. And my only objections to this system altogether is it needs to be super quiet. So that's why I'm thinking an application where it's in an all-in-one kind of computer or even on a desktop cooling system that if you keep the desktop on your desk, then it's perfect because you're still running the fans for cool the CPU anyway.
Right. I mean, they'd have to, but it has to, I don't think CPU air goes through a HEPA filter on its way.
No, but it would in this case. Like you just add it to it.
Yeah. I mean, anything that pulls air in can have an iterative effect on the environment. So yes, as a small iterative effect on your environment, like putting a portable air filter, a little air filter, air purifier on your desk, you could build the air purifier into a monitor or an all-in-one. I'm sure they really don't care which one it is. They're just looking for a partner to put it into something. So
no, I get that.
But I wouldn't. They are kind of touting it as something that could really save you from germs, and I wouldn't expect this to prevent anybody from catching COVID at the office. So that's the thing to keep in mind. I mean, it might make the air a little bit more pure if you are having problems with, I don't know, indoor pollution, just like having any air purifier would, and this would save you desk space because an air purifier takes up desk space. So in that respect, if you look at it that way, it's fine. But we have also this week, this just, very much related news. Did you hear about the controversy around the Razer Zephyr mask?
I did not actually. I'm aware of the Zephyr mask. I know that there's a newer version that came out at CES. Tell me about this controversy.
Actually, if I knew I was going to talk about this, I would reach in my drawer here where I have one. But anyway, the Razer Zephyr mask is Razer's. For those who are not familiar, the Razer's reusable mask that has 2 fans in it, and it has 3 air filters in it, which it had originally advertised as being, I think the term was N95 grade. And they came under some pressure from advocacy groups, and I think was it the FDA or the FTC? I think from the U.S. government about that language, and they actually took the language off of their website now because they never said, "Hey, this is good for COVID," but the implication when you say something is N95 grade is that it is good for COVID, and so So in other words, we have to be when folks are considering devices, whether it be a mask or an air purifier or a monitor with the air purifier built in, that claim to clean the air, if your real concern is trying to filter out germs such as COVID-19, then you need to read the fine print, because if something is not certified or laboratory tested or guaranteed in some way to filter out those particles, then you shouldn't assume that it will. Not everything can actually clean the air, and otherwise it's just an expensive toy. I don't know too many people who would buy $100 or $200 mask to wear it for the heck of it. They're going to wear it because they think it protects them from COVID.
100%. So one last thing about laptops, computers, and CS. What is your general kind of, like, if you had to summarize and write a quick, 500-word article on Tom's Hardware about, the trends you're seeing for particularly mobile computing from CES 2022, what would be your takeaway?
Well, we definitely just talked about 28 watt processors,
Right.
or them being set at 20 watts. So you're definitely seeing higher wattage processors, which means more performance. We saw that there are going to be new mobile NVIDIA GPUs, so we expect some faster gaming notebooks this year. We expect more AMD powered notebooks this year, particularly the ThinkPad Z series is going to be pretty compelling there. So I think more powerful processing this year, some innovation or at least differentiation when you see things like the XPS 13 Plus, whether that's a good innovation or bad innovation will remain to be seen. But I think the big theme in mobile computing was make it a bit faster. I don't think anyone has reinvented the wheel this year. On the other hand, when you try to reinvent the wheel, sometimes you end up with a really bad wheel. So maybe it's good to stick with what works and iterate on it.
What do you think about form factors? We're going to talk about the more phone related news after this, and you'll see there's an interesting form factor little phone we're going to talk about. And I'm wondering, what do you see the trends are on like not tablet per se, but maybe 2-in-1s, but not per se just laptop and gaming laptop, all that. What the trends you see going forward in terms of form factor? Do you see thinner, more powerful gaming laptops, or are we kind of reached the limit of what we can do here?
They are a little bit thinner. I mean, well, it depends actually. I should say there are some thin ones, but we have not gotten to a point where you can realistically play games on something that is as thin as the XPS or even close to it.
Right.
I mean, you're still talking about probably at least 0.7 inches and at least 3.5 or 4 pounds for a low end, highly portable gaming laptop. The other thing that's really important here, though, in the gaming laptop world is you still can't realistically game unplugged. Like that to me would be a real point of inflection when you get to the point where you could actually play for 2 or 3 hours unplugged. But right now, even if you were willing to say live with horrible battery life, oh man, I'm going to get 20 minutes of playing this game, but it's going to be a great 20 minutes unplugged. You can't do it because the systems will not reach the same clock speeds. They cannot deliver enough electricity from battery to do it. So in short, we will see more powerful things are plugged in, but no, we have not seen a massive move toward thinner and lighter. I think the form factor experimentation, we're not seeing a lot of new form factor experimentation. I mean, we did see that secondary screen
the Lenovo thing
on the ThinkBook Plus, which is kind of neat, but I don't think that, I think for 2-in-1s, for example, we're not really seeing a lot of new innovation there. It's mostly been back 2-in-1s. And then, when Microsoft comes out with a new Surface Pro, that will be, they kind of own that space.
Driving. Yeah, they're beating the drum on this one, aren't they? Still.
And of course, in the past, we've seen foldables and things like that, but those are really niche products. I think people have realized what works in the laptop space, and the next inflection point will be when you can do gaming on something that is really portable, that is really, really light.
Right.
But I think we're still years and years away from that. And I'm not even sure how you would get there. I guess you'd have to get down into a much lower, much denser process, like a 5 or 3 nanometer or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm sure it's going to get there eventually. I mean, if you look at, the Macs right now, the Pros, the MacBook Pros with the M1 Pro and Max chips, while they're not, gaming machines, the performance in terms of heavy lifting, if you're doing video editing, for example, and stuff, is very, very impressive. Both battery life and the how fast they can render video and stuff. So I think that there is certainly some things that could happen in that realm. Like games might be able to be optimized to run on chips that are designed, similarly to the M1 chips. And, it'll take a while for that to happen. But if you look at mobile, the mobile games are gotten really, really impressive on phones and tablets. And at the same time, they sometimes touch what we had on our laptops like 5 years ago, in terms of performance. So I think it's eventually going to happen. And that's going to be a great day when you can carry around something that, as you said, you can play a game for 2-3 hours on battery, and that doesn't overheat like crazy, right?
Well,
it'll be fun.
The most interesting PC product this year that could come out this year, should come out this year, was not shown at CES at all, and that is the Valve Steam Deck.
For sure.
So that's an example of something that's supposed to play games, but in a really light Nintendo Switch-like form factor, but PC games.
Yep.
And there's a lot of desire in the market for something like that. We've seen other companies tease it. So I think it will be interesting to see how that performs and how games might be rewritten or optimized for that system.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's switch gears to some mobile news real quick. The Honor Magic 5 or Magic V, depending on who you want to talk to, is finally out. It's in case you didn't know this, Avram, there is going to be a plethora of folding phones out of China this year. It started with, of course, Samsung's not a Chinese company, but they've been driving this very heavily, and Huawei made some folding phones as well. We also saw a folding phone from Xiaomi last year. But back in December, we got the Oppo Find N, which I have here, which is a small form factor Galaxy Z Fold-like device. It has a front display, and it's kind of a smaller version of the Z Fold, but bigger than the Z Flip, and it has a full-on display in the front. That's out, but this Honor Magic 5 is kind of the second coming, and this is the first with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which was announced at the Snapdragon Summit recently, right? So this is out. They've been teasing us about this thing for a while, and what's interesting about it is that it has a 90 hertz refresh rate on the inside display. And, we've seen 120 on the inside display from Samsung, but we've seen the 60 in the past, but 90 is kind of like a new one for an inside display. Now, the outside display is 120, and, that's basically all I have to say about this. It does have that weird spectral camera that we've seen on Huawei phones. So you know how Huawei and Honor separated themselves, Avram? I don't know if you followed this saga.
Not so much, no.
Well, so, Honor used to be a sub-brand of Huawei, and they sold it. Huawei sold Honor to an independent, group of people in China, and they're now their own brand, and they make their own phones. And they also, they don't have the restrictions from the US. They can use the Snapdragon chips full on with 5G, which they're using here. And they can use GMS, the Google mobile services that allow you to get all the googly goodness on your phone. So it's kind of exciting because it kind of is a whole bunch of technology from Huawei inherited by Honor making its appearance now on these phones. And so this spectral camera, which is basically an infrared camera, is the third camera on this phone. And we first saw that on a Huawei phone a few months ago, actually a few weeks ago. So it's interesting to see that even though the companies are separate, a lot of the technologies that they're both using kind of stem from the same root. And we're starting to see that a little bit here. But anyway, it's coming. It's got Android 12, which is nice, and it's got the usual trimmings, lots of storage and RAM. It's going to be about $1,568 US for the 256 gig version and a little more. So it's competitively priced for a folding phone. But it looks very much like a ripoff of the Galaxy Z Fold 3. And in terms of size and form factor, the inside display is 7.9 inches, which is really big. And so, there you go. It exists now because we've been following the rumors of this thing for quite a while. So,
I mean, do you like the folding phone experience?
So it's interesting because I've always liked the flip, the one where it folds into a little compact and you put it in your pocket. I really like that form factor, but I was never a big fan of the fold, the bigger one that turns into a tablet that is similar to this Honor Magic 5. But then the Oppo came out that I just showed you on the video, and that's a shorter version of the fold in a way, and it's smaller and lighter, and it kind of cuts the middle between the two form factors, yet gives you the functionality of the bigger form factor insofar that you can actually use the front display. The front display, the form factor is the same as an iPhone 13 mini, so it's a pretty small form factor, but then you open it up into a tablet, which is almost square and is not huge, 7.1 inches. So it's actually, what I find myself doing is using the front display for most things. And then if I want a little more real estate, I open it up. And you're going to say, well, that's what the Fold is about. But the Fold has a kind of a very narrow front display, and it's hard to use, and it's very tall. And then inside, it's a really big. And you know how Android doesn't do very well with really big displays because it doesn't take advantage of it. So on the Oppo, you don't have this problem because it just scales the phone apps a little bit, and then you actually just get more real estate without feeling like you're having to run a tablet. So it's kind of an interesting kind of middle ground. So I was against this Fold form factor other than the flip version until I got this Oppo. So I don't think this Honor is for me because it's more like the Z Fold 3. But I'm looking forward to other companies making folding phones from China that are more like this Oppo, which is a little smaller. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be curious to try one. I don't do as much with phones as I used to, so I don't get a chance to test all of the new phones and all the foldables. Right. But to me, it seems like this is, as we were talking about the XPS 13 Plus before, a way where you can come up with a more premium thing. Hey, folks are used to paying $800, $900, $1,000 for a standard phone that's not foldable. Hey, could we get them to spend a lot more if we made it foldable? But as far as usability goes, it just seems like a bulkier experience than I want for my phone. And if I'm paying for a lot for a phone, what I really want is I want the best quality camera, because that is the one thing that really changes in the user experience from one generation of phone to another. If you get enough of a change, because and that is what really matters to me, because as a journalist, I'm walking around taking pictures, and as a parent, I'm taking pictures of my kids. So yeah,
for sure.
So the photography is the main feature that I'm looking for when I look for a new phone.
Well, you shouldn't happy to know that Samsung solved this problem. The current, the Flip and Fold are on par in terms of camera performance as what you'd expect from a flagship. Now, the Flip, the smaller one that folds into a little compact, doesn't have a full screen in the front and is lacking a telephoto, but it does have an ultra wide, and the camera system is not the latest, but it's proven and it's solid. The Fold that Samsung makes has a much higher end camera system, which is on par with the Galaxy S21. And the this Magic here, this Magic 5 from Honor, has some pretty serious camera chops, and basically 3 of the sensors are 50 megapixels. There's a main, an ultra wide, and a spectral sensor, as I said earlier, which is that's the gimmick. You don't really need that one. But it's interesting because I think that used to be an argument, but that's no longer the case. And I think there's a lot of people. Personally, I couldn't find a use case for that folding form factor, but I did find a use case with the flip form factor with Samsung. And I think some people, like Michael Fisher, who was on the show last week, he really loves the Fold. And I know a lot of techie people who are using these folding phones because they want more screen real estate, and they actually arrange their screen to multitask, like divide it into 2 running apps simultaneously and all that stuff. For me, it's never really been necessary because I just flip between apps to be my main app on the front. Okay. And for that, the Flip works really well because it's a full-on normal looking phone when it's unfolded, right? But the Fold was a little bit overkill for me. And again, I changed my mind with this Oppo, which is kind of a tweener. And it actually fits my needs quite well. So I think that there is certainly a gimmick factor here, and you pay for the luxury of it. But a lot of the compromise have been taken out. The Samsung phones are water resistant, have wireless charging. By the way, this Magic 5 does not have wireless charging. It's one of the things that's missing here. But they have all the gimmicks but also all the features. So you actually get a pretty complete package. So it's not as much of a compromise anymore. You just pay more, and the question is, do you need it? And I think that's something you answer by using them. I have used, right now the 3 form factors, and frankly, I still prefer the smaller ones of the 3. So, but we'll see. It's good to see more companies trying these out and putting their own flavor on them, even though I think Honor here is kind of just copying Samsung more than anything else. But, again, there's more folding phones coming from China this year, and chances are some of them are going to be unique form factors. So I think everybody's making phones with Samsung's folding displays right now. So, because this is not, Samsung has kind of the the edge, as it were, on this, on making the displays for everyone else. So I think, that doesn't mean that the hinges can't be different. Like in the case of the Oppo, the hinge is very different. It folds completely flat, whereas the Z Fold doesn't fold completely flat and has it has like a little gap in it. So I think, this is where you're going to see the differentiation, the sizes and the form factor and the way the folding works. And is that enough for people to go out there and buy one? I don't know. But I know that a lot of people have bought the Flip this year I should say last year, because the Flip is finally the same price, no compromises, and it folds as a normal Samsung flagship. So why not, right? And I think as we go forward, I think we're going to see more of that. It's just going to be a matter of do you want an SUV or do you want a sedan? Well, do you want a folding phone? Do you want the bar phone? I think it's going to be like that. And the cost is not necessarily going to be a big difference, which I think is exciting. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'm feeling pretty optimistic that more form factors and more choices are better for consumers.
Makes
basically.
Sense.
Quickly, a couple of news items. The OnePlus 10 Pro we talked about last week. It was, multiple embargoes over the time of CES. It was going to be shown at CES, but they didn't because of COVID. We all know everything about it from last week. I just wanted to say that it's now officially available in China. And I think it's going on sale today. And so for the first time ever, a OnePlus flagship is available in China first. It's not a global launch. And I think they're doing this year because of Chinese New Year. They're going to sell a lot more before Chinese New Year. And it's also one of the first Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones. So it's, kind of clout for them. But it's unusual because I don't know if you know this, Avram, but in the past, a lot of Chinese phones are launched in China first and then released globally. But usually OnePlus isn't in that boat. They just get their phones. We all get the phone worldwide, Yeah. So it's the first time that they're doing this. And I just basically want to tell the audience that, if you're in China or in Hong Kong, probably in Hong Kong, you'll be able to buy one right now. Go to a store, go get it. Similarly, Sony's Xperia 5 Mark III is also available in the US now. That's a $1,000 phone, which has that really trick telephoto lens. I don't know if you saw this, Avram, but the telephoto is like a periscope. Nothing unusual there. There's a bunch of phones with that. But it has 2 different positions inside the periscope. So you have a 3x zoom and a 4.4x zoom. And it's mechanically moving the lenses inside that periscope, which is the first time.
That's cool. It's good to see. It's good to see a flagship Sony phone in the US because I don't think we always get them. So
yeah, we've been getting them, but usually with compromises. Like for the previous gen, they always make a 1 and a 5. The 1 is the big phone, and the 5 is the smaller version, and they're identical usually spec wise, just different size screens and batteries. And so this is the small one, which is now the big one was available a few months ago. But they always lack something. Like previously, last 2020, I think it was, they didn't have 5G. Even though the phones had 5G, they didn't work in the US on 5G, which was really a boneheaded move.
Yeah.
And if you look at this phone, it doesn't have wireless charging, but its bigger screen brother does. And it's kind of weird. And also, they're very niche product. They're very good phones. They have all the specs and all the features, but $1,000, like, why would you buy this when you can go buy a Galaxy S21 on sale right now for $650?
Yeah, you have to.
You know what I'm saying?
You have to really like the Sony ecosystem.
And I kind of like that. I like that they're just not pretending anymore to not be a niche player. They want to be a niche player. They're, in fact, pricing themselves and speccing themselves to be niche. Because, this thing has a partnership with Zeiss, has T-Star coated lenses. Like, they're really trying to make this if you're a fan of Sony cameras and you want a phone, this is your phone. And I like that. I think it's smart. You know?
Sure. Why not? I mean, that's how they're going to stand out in this marketplace.
Exactly. I mean, you can't all be Samsung and Apple, right? Like, there's no way, So speaking of Apple, I want to talk with you a little bit about this. It's the 15th anniversary of the iPhone this week. Well, technically it was on the 9th of January. And, I just kind of hit me. I was like, wow, I remember that keynote. Were you there?
No, I was not at the keynote. I was not working for Laptop Mag yet, and I never got to go to the Apple keynotes. Always my boss did. But yeah, that was a really revolutionary thing. But at the time, I remember thinking, okay, but we have BlackBerry, and we've seen things like PDAs or whatever, and they built it into the phone, and it's just Apple doing the same thing, but the fact that they were able to turn it into this ecosystem, I think what's really made iPhone a success wasn't the first gen version. It was when they started to introduce the App Store, and apps became a big deal because that created a whole ecosystem. And then Android came along and was doing the same thing. But before that, I don't recall app stores being a big deal.
Well, there was one on Nokia. Nokia was innovated and created everything before everyone else. They had one. It was called the OV Store. But the point is, you're right. I think the reason I put this in here is not because, I'm not an iPhone user, even though I do have an iPhone for testing, and I do my video recording on iPhones because they do better video. The bottom line is that it just struck me. Like, I remember that keynote. It was incredible. It's still incredible today if you watch it. And, I knew this was going to be a success from the day I saw it, but I didn't realize it was going to be this kind of a success. If I look back, the first 5 years were unprecedented. And I mean, since then, a lot of people are going to argue it's even more unprecedented, the growth of the iPhone. But I feel like it was an exponential growth in the first 5 years. By the time the iPhone 4 came out, which is only the fourth phone, they basically were already making their own chips. They were making, they had already made the phone that was a true competitor. The very first iPhone, as Lance pointed out in this Tech Radar story, wasn't really a smartphone. It wasn't until as you said, App Store came in 2008, but that was a year later, right? Still, I could see the glimmer, and it just blows my mind that here we are 15 years in, and, who'd have thought that? I thought it was going to be a success, but I didn't think it was going to be that big of a success. It's crazy to me, still today.
The ubiquitous use of smartphones is probably the biggest everyday technological change in most people's lifetimes, because you're if you were to tell me 20 years ago or 25 years ago, hey, you're going to have a device in your pocket that has a high quality camera, lets you connect to the internet and watch video, has all of these features to it, and and it's also going to make phone calls. So, I mean, I think there's a really good argument, but maybe the argument's been lost that we should stop calling them phones because
true.
because using them as a phone is the least important use of your handset.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The bottom line is, it's not just the iPhone, right? I mean, Android added a whole bunch of stuff to the equation. And of course, even Nokia and BlackBerry, as they were declining, and Palm did bring some stuff to the table. It's not just all iPhone, but it's kind of incredible to look back and go wow, here we are now, right? And how it's all started, and it was basically a dumb phone with a capacitive touchscreen and some cool software, basically, when it started, right? Let's not kid ourselves. It did things that no other phone did in some ways, but it also lacked. Like it lacked MMS, it lacked video recording, it lacked 3G, it lacked GPS, which other phones had. So it's interesting to see that. But speaking of old companies and old phones, the BlackBerry service for legacy phones was finally discontinued on January 4th. And I kind of forgot that last week. And I just want to say RIP BlackBerry. If you have an old BlackBerry, you're SOL now. Hopefully you don't. But anybody who's listening here, I assume, probably still has one in a drawer somewhere. But if you are still using it, you weren't after January 4th.
Well, I guess we can pour one out for BlackBerry.
I mean, basically, yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to mention it. And related to that, we've had rumors of Onward Mobility, the company who acquired the BlackBerry name from TCL, who made the last Android BlackBerries with a hardware keyboard, the Key 1 and the Key 2. They bought that brand, the branding BlackBerry for the phones, Onward Mobility, and they promised us a BlackBerry phone with 5G. And it's been like a year and a half or so. And we all thought this was a done deal, that they'd kind of folded and given up. But no, they issued a press release recently saying, no, we're still working on this. We'll give you a keyboard phone with 5G that's in a BlackBerry form factor running Android. So those of you who are hardcore users, there you go.
I would like that. I mean, rather than going forward to the future where we have foldables, I would like to go back to the past where I have a hardware keyboard, because I really miss having a hardware keyboard on my phone. But if you can even get a hardware keyboard phone these days, you have to compromise
on everything
else.
Yeah, pretty much. Did you ever use the Key 1 and Key 2? The Key 2 particularly, which was the TCL made BlackBerry Android phone a couple of years back, was a really great phone all around. I reviewed it for Geekspin and I really liked it. And in fact, some folks, again, I'll bring up Michael Fisher here, who is the champion of weird form factor adoption. He used it as his main phone for a while. So did you ever use that one? Because there was very few compromises.
I think I got to see it, but I didn't really get to spend any time with it. So no, but I know that like you're still not getting like the camera quality that you get. And for me, that's the number one thing that I look for in a phone. So if I get a more comfortable data entry experience with keyboard, but I don't get as good a camera, I can't make that trade-off.
You need to carry two phones like we all do. Like one is an iPhone, and that way you get the best camera. And it could be a Samsung Galaxy for all I care. But you carry one phone for imaging and for some stuff, gaming, whatever, big video screen, and then you carry one for all your work stuff, and that would be your keyboard phone. So there you go, done.
Yes, I'll just get some parachute pants to hold all the phones.
That's right. Or you can do what some people are doing with this Planet Computers Astro Slide 5G. I put in the notes for you, would this form factor appeal to you? This is essentially a microscopic laptop.
Yes, it would appeal to me.
All right. So just to be clear, Planet Computers, this is their third or fourth phone now. They've been doing these for a while, but this is the first with 5G. The form factor has always been the same, where it basically looks like one of those Scion organizers. Remember those? You were around for that.
Yep.
Okay. So the form factor is Scion organizer. It's about the size of a phone, like a big phone today. And this is a MediaTek Dimensity 800, which is not a bad chip. It's a mid-range chip, but it's pretty decent with 5G. And this version is called the Astro Slide, which is a funny name, 5G. But, I don't think the camera on this is going to satisfy your needs no more than the BlackBerry Key 2 did 2 years ago, Avram. But at the same time, this might actually be the one for you. This keyboard's probably way better than the BlackBerries. It
is, but you know what else? I have to think about how I use my phone. And a lot of times how I use my phone is in there is an extent to which I use it for serious work, sending emails to people. And where I wish I had a keyboard, because I make so many typos with a software keyboard. I'm still terrible at typing on a software keyboard. So that would be great. But a lot of times if I'm just kind of sitting around looking at it, like the bulk of having that extra thing flip out probably wouldn't be so great. And these things I admit, to me, these things look cooler than they are to use in real life. So I remember, for example, do you remember ultra mobile PCs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The UMPC's craze. I was there for that.
So I think I still have in a drawer somewhere this, what was it called? The Villav N5, which was a Windows laptop that was very similar form factor and keyboard size to the Astro Slide. And, I tried it for a while. Not only was it slow, but even though it had a keyboard that was about the same size as this one, it actually wasn't as great for typing as you might think, because you can't really touch type on something that size, so you have to thumb type anyway. And if you get to a certain size, it's actually harder to thumb type because you have to reach across with your thumbs.
100%, yeah.
So it's not as good, and then holding the whole thing up is a little bit unwieldy. So
you can say that again, yeah.
I think the best phone typing experience I had was on my Motorola Droid, which was a slider.
Yep.
I think that was the best. The
pinnacle for you.
The pinnacle. Having it in sort of a candy bar shape like a BlackBerry would not be bad either. But I kind of accept I'm just going to make typos all the time now.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few people I know who have embraced this form factor, the specific Planet Computers form factor that's been around for a while, that they've been iterating on. And it's sysadmins. So people who need to manage servers remotely and lead a Linux command line or some sort of command line access remotely from their phone. They are the ones using this. They literally put it down on a desk and use it as a mini laptop to do like a few little things, the maintenance, start the scripts, make sure everything's running properly, close it, and off you go.
I would love that personally, but I would wonder how small your hands have to be to actually type command line commands comfortably.
Yeah. That's a challenge. I have big hands too. I don't know. I think, again, I'm just love that this is a company like Sony, but very much different in the sense that Sony is huge and these are just a bunch of small guys from the UK or wherever that is making this niche product, that they're not afraid, that they've been iterating. It's not just the first one. It's not just a one-off. This company's been around and clearly selling enough of them to stay in business to make the next version. That to me is what smartphones are all about. Yeah, sure. The mainstream, the Toyota Corollas of smartphones, right? The iPhones and the Samsungs, great. But, we also want our Lamborghinis, right? Like our gaming phones. And we also want our, weird form factors, the folding phones. And then you have this thing. I just feel so excited to see that there's still, in this day and age, where you'd think the candy bar would be the end-all be-all of phones, some weird stuff coming from small and big companies alike.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to see. I'd like it to have a pointing stick in the middle, so it's just like my ThinkPad.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Totally. Well, listen, we should wrap it up, but do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, Avram? All the social media handles, also where they can find Tom's Hardware?
Sure. You can find our website at tomshardware.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GeekInChief. And every Tuesday, if you go to the Tom's Hardware YouTube channel at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, I host a show called the Tom's Hardware Piecast, where we talk about only Raspberry Pi things.
Awesome. And yeah, you're a big Raspberry Pi aficionado. I love the Raspberry Pi. It's such a great platform. So thanks for holding the torch on that. Yeah. And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, that's TNKGRL on Twitter and on Instagram. Think of the comic book character Tankgirl, drop all the vowels, and that's my handle. Twitter is where you want to talk to me and Avram about this show. Just comment, let us know what you think, ask us questions, whatever you have about this particular episode, go to Twitter. Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones, pretty pictures of cars, since I review cars for Tech Radar. And then, of course, there's a couple of YouTube channels, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore, which have video content related to the podcast. The main channel, Mobile Tech Podcast, is all the unboxing videos and review videos and hands-ons with phones and direct peripherals like audio accessories, that kind of stuff. And then Mobile Tech More is where you'll find car tech, home automation, travel tech, like more peripheral stuff to mobile. And this is a new channel that my producer and I have been working on. So please subscribe to both channels. You know how YouTube works. Like the videos, comment, all that good stuff. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. That's the URL. There's an RSS feed there for those of you who like to type on your Linux terminals. And of course, you can listen to the podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. So you have no reason not to subscribe. If your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. That would really help for discovery, so I'd appreciate that. And then, of course, there's a Patreon. I mentioned that earlier, patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. I want to thank my Patreon community. You guys are awesome. You know, it makes a big difference. This show is a bit of a labor of love for me, so having folks help me out financially is a really wonderful thing. So I want to thank a few people here that joined this week. I want to thank JD, John F., and Thomas H., 3 new patrons this week. Much appreciated. You're probably wondering what's the point of joining. Well, guess what? You get this video version that me and Avram talked about earlier, where you can get to see me hold up cool phones like that Xperia 5 Mark III that I have in my hands right now, which I'm reviewing, and other devices. But most importantly, you get a bit of a more raw experience. I don't edit as much, and you kind of get it sooner. You'll probably get it tonight on Thursday. That's one of the tiers, but there's other tiers. There's cheaper tiers too if you want. There's a Discord server you can join. So look into this Patreon, check it out, see if you can help and support me. Any bit of help is appreciated. And of course, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible's been with us since day one, and they are fantastic. We have a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a book at the end, whether you stay or not. I think you'll stay. You'll see why in a second. But the URL is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. If you're like me and you love to read, they have a ton of books, ton of selection. A lot of books are read by the authors. You get some short form content as well, some podcasts as well there if you want. The best part though is that, I'm on my computer all day and my eyes get tired and I don't want to read in the evening on a book. I want to just put headphones on, earbuds, and listen. And that's exactly what Audible provides. Somebody reads you a book and it's wonderful and you just lay back and relax. And if you're on a plane, it's the same thing. You don't have to worry about, can I read this Kindle or book and because the lighting is poor because it's nighttime? Or you don't have to worry about if you're driving on a road trip and you're the driver. You could basically get a book read to you. So check it out. And I want to thank Audible for being our longtime sponsor. And Avram, thanks again for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Always happy to come on.
Wonderful. Well, we'll definitely have you on at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another podcast next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.